Well, I think we have two fundamental structural problems in our economy. One is that we have tangled people up in a web of dependence from which they can't escape, and so we're leaving lots of talent on the field. Secondly, we're crushing small businesses now. Elizabeth Warren is right. Crony capitalism is alive and well. Big business and big government go hand in hand, but for the first time in U.S. history now, we are destroying more businesses than we are creating.
And we are back, and we're back with Peter Morici, syndicated columnist, economist at the University of Maryland, former chief economist of USITC, and the best-looking bow ties in the business. Peter, welcome to the show.
Nice to be with you again.
So you wrote a fascinating article that I had an opportunity to read where you make the case to replace the income tax with a value-added tax. Why don't you lay that out for us?
Well, as we all know, the income tax is terribly arcane. It favors some businesses over others. Overall, we pay more income tax than anybody else in the world. We go to a simple value-added tax. The way it would work for a business is you'd pay taxes on everything you buy, like say 12%. But you'd get to subtract any taxes you pay to buy things. So at the end of the year, you'd get a big rebate, and you'd basically pay 12% on the actual value you create, the sales less what you buy. It's very simple. It would be a three-line return. It would end things like depreciating equipment, keeping track of lunch expenses, and what qualifies and what doesn't. Everything qualifies. So it'd be quite simple, and individuals wouldn't have an income tax at all.
Peter, Europeans have been grappling with the VAT for years. I call it the Vanishing America tax because it seems to me that if we impose this tax, Americans will pay higher and higher and higher taxes. In European countries that have adopted this tax, it starts at 5%, 6%, and now it's up in some countries to 26% or more. So what do you do to protect us from higher and higher taxes when that tax is hidden in the price of what you buy?
Well, it's not hidden. I mean, you can see it. But what would protect us most is it's got to be an even deal. And that is that we get rid of the corporate income tax and the personal income tax on the day that we implement the VAT. It can't be one put on top of the other. Right now, we haven't been very good at protecting ourselves from rising taxes at all by having it to be, quote, transparent. I mean, we're paying the highest corporate taxes in the industrialized world. And if you're a small business person or a professional, you're paying upwards of 50% of your income in taxes at 2 or 3 different levels. So I don't know how we're ahead this way.
So, Peter, what's the downside to this? I mean, I've always thought that VAT made a lot of sense because people are paying based on what they spend. Rich people tend to buy more expensive things. They'll pay more taxes. But there must be a downside or we would have gone to this system already. Make the argument against your argument.
Well, for one thing, it doesn't permit the government to pick winners and losers, because that's what it does when it gives preferences. So if you like the government being an industrial policy, you want a corporate tax as opposed to a VAT, because then the president can give money to 20 bogus solar energy projects where his political party happens to be involved. Or the Republicans can give breaks to oil companies because the oil companies tend to be loyal to the GOP. It is not as progressive as an income tax because, after all, 50% of the population doesn't pay any income tax at all right now. One of the ways I would deal with that would be to give, it'd be not to do it at 12%, which would replace the existing corporate and personal taxes, but to do it at 16% and give everybody $3,500 for every child they've got. Also, you have a problem of an intergenerational one-time effect. And that is, older folks have already paid taxes on their income, and now they pay it on what they buy, the folks that are retired. So for a period of time, I would give older folks $3,500 a year, people over 66, and it would transition out over 10 or 15 years.
Of course, the other big hitch, Peter, is that when you said that you'd like to eliminate the income tax and the corporate income tax before you put this into effect, all the proposals have always said phase out the income tax. And of course, nobody trusts that it'll ever be phased out.
Well, that's why I don't want to phase it out. My feeling is if you can, in 2018, you just don't collect income taxes, but you collect the value-added tax. And you have a much simplified return. Now, there would be people that wouldn't like this. For example, there are a couple 100,000 accountants who make their living doing personal income tax returns. And there are all those people on Capitol Hill who basically trade preferences to get big corporate, tax breaks. A classic one was last year. President Obama gave the internet companies and the cable companies a break. They basically reclassified the wires in the street, on the telephone poles, as real estate, which permitted Comcast and Verizon to put that infrastructure into a real estate investment trust and pay much lower corporate taxes.
Peter,
Comcast is an enormous contributor to the Democratic White House.
We're short on time, Peter. I just want to get a quick question, quick answer. And has there been a comparative study as to what we could expect to bring in from a VAT versus what we currently bring in on income tax?
Well, if you applied it to all private purchases, you would bring in the same amount of money at 12%. If you wanted to rebate to people $3,500 a year per child, and to older people over 65, $3,500 a year per person, then you'd have to set it at 16%. It's not hard to figure out. You look at private purchases and you say, how much percent do I need?
Peter, we're running on time. Got to let you go. Interesting subject. We'll talk more about it again. Thank you, Peter Morici.
Take care.
This is great. Up next, more of the Steve Malzberg Show.